In the field of neuropsychology, this is interesting because you talked about you wanted to understand how things work, like what happens to food when you digest it, how do your eyes work, whatever it is. But when you start getting into the brain, you're talking about how the actual mechanical function of the brain makes the mind work. That's it. Pardon the pun, but you're getting into a grey area here that no one really understands, do they?
Yes.
No one still does.
No one still does, yes. And that's what I'm learning every day from biomedical science. There's a lot more that we could still try and understand. And literally one of them is how the brain works. Like, we all have the brains to tell our brains not to think about our brains.
Something like that.
It's something like that, yeah. But it's really interesting, though, because then we have some idea of how some things might work. Does that sort of mechanism actually follow through with the rest of the processes? And what's the involvement of the chemistry in your brain? Like that, those for me are sort of going to be my main interests when I get into the field of neuropsychology. Like, how does like the chemistry in your brain affect everything else? I mean, this is probably a reductionist view of like how humans work, but in the end, it's still a chemical reaction. The stimulus is just so like psychological, but the chemical reaction is still a chemical reaction. And how that transmits back into something still psychological is just interesting to me. How does like making serotonin make you like feel this or make you feel that? It's so, like, even as I explain it to people, I always still find it so interesting.
Oh, yeah. One of the great mysteries. I'm not sure that we'll ever really fully understand it.
No.
Have you ever had an MRI scan on your head?
Yep.
Wow.
It was
Can I ask
fun.
you, what did it look like to you? Because I had one a few years ago.
Yep.
And when I asked the doctor, like, there's these dark patches inside my head. And
Oh,
I was
yeah.
asking him what those dark patches are, and he said, well, we don't really know. It's like, and then I started to get a bit worried.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, is that cancer or what is that? I don't know what that is.
Tell me now.
It doesn't look friendly. But the eeriest part for me was, unlike x-rays of when you've broken a bone or, you see your kidneys or whatever it might be, that's just a functional part of your body that everybody has. But your brain is so deeply personal. That's the part that makes you uniquely you.
Exactly.
The thoughts and everything that happens in there. And I just found it a bit freaky to actually look inside my head like that. I don't know what your response was. What did you think?
Okay, well, because I think there was this one time, I guess, that like I experienced sort of, it wasn't really too traumatic. It was just like something that really got them to think about like my neuropsychology and if it was affected so much. Okay, they said that I'm normal. That's for every future employer that I have. They did confirm that I'm normal. Just saying, employers out there. But what they found interesting apparently was that it's like apparently was bigger by like percentiles.
Oh, so you have a very large brain. Is that what you're going to tell us now?
Yeah. Large
That's where all these big ideas are coming from, right?
But yeah, I do agree with what you said. It is so personal because now, I'm not sure if this is actually like something that not a lot of people get told or know, but now we're shifting our idea of the brain as not just like an organ. It's more of like a muscle. We know that our muscles, we can work them out, they can change like shape. They don't increase in number. They just increase in size.
You're right.
That's how you get those buff dudes. But
I've always wondered how that happened.
But the brain can do sort of like that as well, because the brain also doesn't grow in number. Once you're born, you have a certain amount of neurons, and that's there.
And then we spend the rest of our lives destroying
with the
them.
same number, yeah. But what actually happens is the more that you exercise it, the more that like these branches, like these connections between them change. So you can like, before you could have like, oh, we connected this one, and maybe at some point you disconnected that, shifted it like this. And now these loose ends, let's just put it into context. These are your forgotten memories.
Yes.
These were the ones that you will probably remember at some point, but unless like that happens, it's not going to happen.
They're like disconnected pathways.
Basically. And again, and that's why exercising your brain like cognitively, as in like, not like, pumping it up or whatever, you can't really do that. Like the brain doesn't like physical touch. if you exercise it with like cognitive thought and everything, those pathways remain connected. And that's one of the ways that they're trying to prevent dementia. Because I know that dementia, from learning about it, that it does affect a lot of people here in Australia, surprisingly as well. So one of the ways that they're trying to resolve that is to exercise their brain in a cognitive manner. And you think, oh, it's treatment. It's probably going to be like this weird regimen of like, drugs and then this and then that. But actually how you do this cognitive treatment is actually to go out, grab a coffee with friends, talk to them, engage with them, tell stories, recount stories, share experiences. And that by itself is enough to keep that what's called cognitive reserve in your head and to keep those pathways from branching off.
To keep them connected, yeah. So essentially it's about stimulation, which in the muscular analogy is exercise. It's just exercising your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about philosophy before. I want to ask you a philosophical question.
Ooh, let's go.
And I know you've only just celebrated your 21st birthday yesterday, so happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you.
But I'm curious about your view on this. If we're talking about chemical reactions within the brain that somehow translate into thoughts, ideas, sort of tangible
manifestations.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Manifestations. Thank you.
I like that word.
What do you think the soul is? And where does the soul live inside the body? Traditionally it's probably the heart because, that's where we feel things.
Yeah.
But what is the soul and where does that live?
To me, the soul, I've never changed my idea of the soul. I think the more that I learn about the sciences, the more that I just confirm to myself, this is the soul. So for me, the soul is pretty much all of your consciousness and your body together in the most memeable way that I could think of. It's as if your body and like your consciousness had a love child and they called it soul. So for me, the soul is your body able to think that it's conscious, but also able to accept that it is a body, if that makes sense.
Interesting, it does.
Yeah.
It's almost the holistic idea of your collective thoughts, but your self-awareness.
Exactly. Because it is more than self-awareness. The soul probably isn't aware of its presence, but you offer it the ability to think you do exist. Because you're conscious and you know that you're encased in this beautiful system. I can go about with the biochemistry of the body, but we don't have a lot of time. But it's just that. It's the idea that your body and your consciousness are in this combination, in this one form. And that's the soul.